And then in 2020, when COVID hit, then it happened again. I started planning what I was going to do for my exit of life.
This is Built for Love, where we explore self awareness, growth, and real transformation. Because love isn't something we chase, it's something we're built for. Welcome back to Built for Love. I'm your host, Javier Ortega. And today's conversation is a deep one. It's about what happens when the life you build stops being enough to save you. This is a story about identity, about breaking, about rebuilding, and about what remains when everything you thought was holding you together falls apart. And at the center of it all, a moment, a phone call that changed everything. Today, I'm joined by perspective expert, founder of Searles Success Systems, and author of I Survived Suicide by Killing Myself. Trapper Searles, Trapper, welcome.
Javier, it's great to be here, man. How are you?
I'm doing really, really good. Thank you. I'm honestly excited to have you here on Built for Love. I've followed your work for quite some time now. So to finally sit down and talk about your book and the work that you're doing, it means a lot. So let's go ahead and jump in. I want to start with the title of your book. Tell us why you chose it and what part of you actually had to die.
I I had a dream the last day of August in 24, and I rolled over in bed. And I looked at Samantha, my wife, and I said, "Hey, I just had a dream. I wrote a book." And she kind of laughed, and she looked at me and she said, "You don't even read." And I was like, "I don't know if I have to. I don't know if I have to be a big reader to write a book." Since then, I've actually become quite the reader. But you know, multiple parts of me, I think, what led up to the suicide attempt was a breakdown a breakdown of whatever security I thought I had. So the first thing that really had to go was this false identity of, who I was that I thought everybody else wanted me to be. And so I would just say my entire identity had to go, and then you wake up and you look in the mirror and you look like the same person, but you really focus on how do I create an intentional identity, build a awareness of who I am, who I want to be, and then that's kind of like what started the progression from that day in September in 21, moving forward.
Can you take me into how that actually showed up in your relationship? Especially with Sam, like how you handled your emotions, control, and responsibility during that time.
Honestly, when I met my wife, that's kind of what changed everything as far as like kind of like redirected who I was going to be for myself to who I felt like I had to be for her. And, I'm actually writing a new book called Blind Expectations. And the whole basis of that is, what I've identified now, by looking back and reflecting on my life, is that when I met my wife, Samantha, back in like 2005, I created an expectation for her about me. And then I started trying to live up to that expectation that didn't exist. So it sounds like an odd dynamic because it is, but everybody does this in certain relationships in their life where they create an expectation for somebody else about them. And when we do that, we're really setting ourselves up for failure. Like you cannot accomplish success trying to reach the top of someone's expectations when they never did that. They never set that, right? But in my head, I thought I had to conquer all of these things. And I thought that, this expectation of myself through Sam's eyes, it created a lifelong existence until I was 38 years old of failure because it was unattainable because it didn't exist. It was climbing a mountain that never ended.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of us carry expectations we were never actually given, whether it's from our parents, our partners, or even just from growing up. And over time, that weight builds
Oh
until we're
yeah.
living for something that may not even be real.
Oh yeah, it's so true because the biggest thing is it just a lack of communication because if we ask our partner what their expectations of us are, we might feel disappointed or we might feel like we're not going to be able to meet them. So instead, which is crazy, we create these wildly impressive expectations for them that we then become consumed on trying to reach, which generally are significantly higher or
Right, right.
completely different than what they would have communicated to us.
What's wild is the fear of asking what someone expects from us usually comes from the expectation we've already created in our own minds.
Oh yeah, you become all consumed by that expectation. I didn't get to have that conversation with Sam, unfortunately, at all, right? Because after my, after my attempt, Sam ended up being in the hospital shortly after that for a long time, and now she has aphasia, which is a speech disorder. So like, I've never got to have that conversation of, like, hey Sam, like, what do you expect of me as your partner? So I've had to recreate what I what I think her expectation is, but that's also through a way more genuine connection I have with her, and so she's been able to communicate enough that I understand what it is, but I also now know that that doesn't matter, right? And so that might be part of the message of this is people can set expectations for us, but we do not have a responsibility to meet that expectation for somebody else. Like we don't owe anybody, the answer they want, so I'm a big believer in trying to eliminate expectations and create standards in my life. And so it's hard to eliminate the word expectations, but if we try to reframe them into, I have certain standards in my life, I have certain boundaries, um, we can replace the word most of the time, because if we create a standard in our life, it can translate to, hey, this is the standard that I have for these things. You don't make you're not hitting the standard, right? But the standard is a very well constructed, communicated idea, and so it's not just like a guess, which is an expectation.
If I do want to go back, going back to reference the book, it's when Sam reconnected with her first love and how much that impacted you. Can you take us back to that time?
Yeah, yeah. So the first experience of that was in 2015, and we were at a Halloween party. It was a pretty challenging night, to say the least. Sam was being very strange, very, obsessed with her phone, but like all of our friends were in this space. It was just kind of an odd thing to see my wife being so strange with her phone because I just never seen that before. And so, I asked, hey, what's going on? And she was like battling me over this thing and she's being very weird. So, I grabbed her phone, which was the first time I ever did that in like 10, 11 years of being together. I just had no reason to do that. And that's where I kind of broke my heart. I read just a very short portion of it that was, you still bring butterflies to me, and I love you, and then I love you back, and it was devastating. We'd been married for 10 years at that point, and we had a 3-year-old adopted little girl, and so that was the first experience that I had with that. And so Sam and I ended up getting back, together as a unit the next morning, and I took a shower and we drove back to Denver. I went and saw my doctor. I called my therapist, had a conversation, and then Sam and I started working on some things. And I had a lot of ownership in that situation during that in 2015. There was a lot of ownership that I had to take for not being present, not being a great dad, not knowing where Jaden was going to preschool. I was never present. I was working all the time. Again, I was chasing these expectations that I thought this woman had of me, and I was just failing. But clearly those weren't what she wanted. I wasn't meeting any of her needs because she was stepping out of our marriage for certain things, and so I really owned that back in 2015. And so I hired a business coach to help me change my company and dove into that. I kept meeting with my therapist on how to become a better person, personal development. And then in 2017, 2018, Sam did that again with the same person. And that was like, listen, like not cool. Like I've done a lot of personal development. I've grown a lot. I've now done everything I can do to like be solid here. I kind of feel like this is on you. I mean, it wasn't like I was pretty upset. So, Sam's mom really kept us together at that moment. Like, hey, you guys have a lot that you need to live for. And she was a big advocate for me. Like, Trapper's a great guy. He's made so many changes, etc. And so Sam invested some time into getting herself right, for a while. And then in 2020, when COVID hit, Sam lost this amazing job she had. And then it happened again. And I didn't really even do much at that point. I just started planning my attempt at that point. I didn't really go down the rabbit hole of I'm a great guy and I'm doing all these things and you're doing this. It was just kind of like, I must not be the right person for Sam, right? I started planning what I was going to do, for my exit of life and getting insurance in place and getting my business as organized as it could be. So it was least chaotic for Sam, when I was going to be gone.
You mentioned your attempt, and in the beginning, I spoke about a moment, a phone call that changed everything. Can you take us back to that day?
So I went on a fishing trip with some friends and we'd gone on it before. So I knew the mountain really well where we were at. So we had gotten camp set up, and then we went fishing all day. I cliff jumped for the first time. I'm afraid of heights. So I think one of my buddies was like, oh, that's weird. Like Trapper just volunteered to go up to the top of this cliff and jump into the river. I've watched that video since I did that and it still scares me. But when I did it, I had no fear, honestly, because like if it didn't work out, wasn't gonna, I was already planning on leaving, right? And so we had a really amazing day on the river, fishing and just, with my buddies. And then that night, those of us that had kids and relationships, we would drive up to the top of the mountain, which was about a 45-minute drive. And you had to go all the way up there to get cell phone reception. And so what my plan was to get all the way up to Cell Phone Ridge and call Jaden. Sam and I weren't on speaking terms necessarily because of everything that was going on. And I called Jaden, and she was 9 at the time. And I remember us having a really great call with her. I mean, the intent of the call was just to have a very normal, how was your day? And she would ask me how fishing was. And I told her I went fishing and I cliff jumped and then I'd send her the video. And it was a very normal conversation. There was no way that she knew by anything that I said anything was going to happen. So I just wanted it to be left that it was a very normal conversation for her. I don't want her to think that there was anything weird about it. And then I was also really at peace having the conversation with her. And then we got off the phone and I had this gigantic F450 dually. It's kind of like one of those, the tool that drives the big truck. Like that was me. That was the tool that drove the big truck. And it was deleted. It was a diesel, and it could go really fast. And so I remember just getting in the truck. I had my moment with myself, and then I just kind of hit it. I was going down the straightaway that eventually hit a guardrail, and then you would just go over the canyon, and it's probably 2,500 foot drop in elevation. So that was kind of the plan. So I got up to 140 miles an hour, getting up to this point, and I was very much in a place of peace. You know, I've talked to a lot of people through ideation and different things that they've gone through, and a lot of people I've talked to said, you know, that they felt peace also. And then there's also people that have felt fear, but there's also been people that were happy that it was going to be done. You know, like life was going to be done. It was so hard. I just felt like a sense of peace. And about 100 feet from the guardrail, my navigation lit up in my truck and it said Stinky Bean. And that was Jaden's name in my phone. And in that moment, I just felt quickly like she needs me. And so I stopped. I was probably 50 feet and I answered the phone. I said, Jaden, what's up? And now I remind you, there should be no cell phone reception here. I've driven this spot for several years. Like that's why you have to go up to the top of the hill. And the reason I did that was because I didn't want to be interrupted. I didn't want to be stopped, right? And I think that's why this part of the story is so important. Is that phone call came through for a reason, and when Jaden said on the other end of the line was really impactful. She said, "Dad, you didn't sound like yourself earlier. I want you to come home." And I was like, okay. I didn't even ask why or anything. I just said, okay. And I got off the phone and I just remember thinking, it's bigger than me and I need to figure it out. And for the first time, I kind of had to address like maybe Sam and I aren't meant to be together. Maybe that's okay. Maybe, you know, like I didn't really know what to think. I just knew that Jaden needed me. And it was the first time that I really recognized I always took pride in being a dad, and I always felt like, and for a long time, I felt like I was a good dad after like 2015, 2016. But that moment was like, even if Sam and I don't work out, I'm still me, right? Like I can still be myself, and Jaden needs that guy. And that's what really got me to like reshift where I was at. And then I just drove. I went down to the bottom mountain. I told my buddies I had to get home, that Jaden needed me, and I just drove home. I got home about 2 o'clock in the morning. Sam was still awake. Jaden wasn't. I walked in the door, and there wasn't like Sam wasn't emotional or anything. I was just like, "Hey, I just want to let you know this is what I was planning on doing." And it wasn't like some, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't do that." It was, we just had like a big disconnect by then, that it really didn't hit her like that. Um, but I also was like, that's okay. Because I didn't react to her not being sad like I normally would have. I mean, I think I think I was kind of over it pretty fast. You know what I mean? It was kind of like a switch from, I just recognize that I have way more to live for than just this relationship. Um, and so that following day, I talked to my therapist quite a bit. I enrolled in a counseling program and then really focused just on myself. You know, I still did the things I needed to do as a dad and the things that I needed to do to support Samantha with what she was doing, but I really just focused on myself. And honestly, I just had never done that. I just think that night it was a sense of clarity where I could just really be myself. And that was pretty special. I just didn't feel like I owed it to anybody to serve them in a certain way.
Yeah, that's powerful. And what really stands out to me is that shift from everything feeling like it was ending to realizing that your life wasn't just about you anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important because the subtitle of the book, it leads into that, right? And I don't know if people connect that necessarily. However, what happened between the attempt and then it was only a short few months, Samantha had a traumatic brain injury. She had a ruptured brain aneurysm April 16th of 22. So actually in 6 days, it'll be the 4-year mark from her injury. And And that's just amazing to say in general, because 4 years ago in 6 days, she wasn't supposed to live. I mean, it was a very, very significant random injury, ruptured brain aneurysm. And, I think what was wild is, again, life building up the fortitude and the resilience in not just me, but our family to be able to enter that for her while she's fighting for her life, and she doesn't even know it because she's not able to when she was in the ICU. It just started this crazy life we had to enter into that you never ever think about entering into. Like, people that go into this never think that it's ever going to happen to them, and we were no different. I mean, never in a million years would have thought that Sam would have, had something like this happen to her or to us. And again, there was a little bit of that victim mentality because I still didn't know a lot of what I know now. But going into it, I think what's special is like the entrepreneurial spirit in me of problem solution. I just focused on that every day, and like, Sam's struggling with this, and this. I'm going to figure out this, and this. And so it was kind of like, I'm just going to continue to work through this the best I can and learn how to adapt to whatever this is going to be. And after 76 days in ICU, multiple brain surgeries, multiple cardiac arrests, a stroke. She has aphasia, which is a speech disorder. We were fortunate that she got to come home following 180 days total in the hospital. So 76 days in ICU and then 104 days in rehab. And then that's actually where the real work started. When you're a person, when someone that is in the hospital and with a traumatic injury, and then they're going to be coming home, the hospitals will generally put you through counseling and trainings so that you know how to do the best job you possibly can when you're home. And so, Jaden and I were like, oh, we're going to crush it, right? Like, we know how to do all this stuff. But then, like, you get home and you're like, oh, well, we don't have a button we can push for help at any hour of the day. And so, we really had to learn how to be caregivers. And sometimes people get uncomfortable when I share some of the caregiving stuff, but it's real, right? And a lot of people just don't understand. This isn't my child that went through this, and this isn't my parent that went through this. This is my spouse. This is the person this is my mate, this is my lover, this is my whole world. And people sometimes think that this is insensitive, but this is real. So, like, as a caregiver, people around you will be like, oh, you have to help them shower and get dressed. And I used to get so frustrated with how people would downplay how much work went into being a caregiver of your spouse specifically. And I'm like emphasizing that because I had to change tampons. I had to clean my wife. I had to do everything you have to do with an infant, but also with a teenage female. Like, I had to do all of that stuff. And that is different. And I really emphasize that part of this because I've talked to so many people and they're like, oh yeah, I was the caregiver for my mom when she was in hospice before she passed. And I'm like, I'm so sorry that you had to do that, but not the same. And, and I don't like being that guy, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm kind of going to stick up for what Jaden and I had to do, because it was a team effort to get Sam where she is today. Not just me, but my daughter, being 10 and 11 and 12 and 13, and she's going to be 14 in a couple of weeks. She's done things most human beings never will have to do. And there's a lot of people like that in the world, right? I'm very blessed to have the life we have. And I know there's people that have it so much worse than we do. And I know that. And that's why I'm so blessed with what we have. But like my 9-year-old, no 9-year-old should have to go through what Jaden went through with her mom. And one of the bigger things too, Javier, to bring up that I kind of looked over was Jaden's adopted. I kind of glazed over that, but there was a moment in time where if Jaden wouldn't have called me, Sam still would have had this injury. Like this is something that would have happened regardless. And our adopted child would have been parentless in a matter of 7 months. And and again, that's one of those things where like you don't understand the perspective because you're living it right now, right? Like our perspective later is being created right now.
Right.
You know, I don't think a lot of people recognize that or how special that is. Like right now, you and I are shaping perspectives for people. We're shaping perspective for one another. And we may not be impacted ever, but we might be. And it might be a perspective that we look onto this moment or something along the lines. And so that's why it's so important for me to talk about perspective and expectations and kind of everything else. But yeah, when we had to become a caregiver, it was one of the most challenging. I've done a lot of hard things. Um, I've been through a lot of hard times. I've done a lot of hard things. Being a caregiver for my 40-year-old wife was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Wow. I just want to acknowledge that for a second because that's a lot to carry, especially in the way that you had to step into that role and you still loved her. But at the same time, there's also pain, responsibility, and so much changing all at once. Like, how did you hold all of that?
Yeah, that's a tough one also because your partner is no longer the same partner. That's hard to come to terms with, so to speak. I don't think you really do. I know I haven't fully just said, okay, this is it. You know, I just, I tell Sam all the time that I miss my Sam. I miss her voice. I miss her physical look. I miss so much about our relationship, right? But I'm also blessed to have this version of Sam that has taught me so much. Um, I think people that really know me would be like, you know, people that have known me my whole life and then know me now still would be like, wow, Trap was such a dickhead for such a long time and was like the most impatient person alive and was always so fast, fast, fast and short fused. But those same people today would be like, Trapper is one of the most optimistic, intentionally moving, positive, optimistic human beings alive. And and I wouldn't be like that if Sam didn't experience this. And so in a weird way, like Sam and I's relationship is even stronger as far as like emotionally connecting. Like our physical relationship isn't what it used to be, but like our emotional connection is stronger. But also just learning how to have honest communication within your relationships, it gets rid of any expectation. I don't have any expectations of Sam. I don't have any expectations for her, and she doesn't have any for me. And so people can take that a certain way, but in our marriage, first of all, I'm a really busy serialpreneur. Like I'm always doing something, right? And so I don't have time for other relationships. So some people would be like, "Oh, you must be in like an open relationship because of these challenges," and it's like, no. You know, there was a time like during the hospital that I was going through some hard things, and it's in the book. I don't shy away from some of these things, but I also don't go out there and look. I'm not trying to replace Samantha. Um, do I miss like some of the physical stuff? Sure, I think that's normal. But I also really appreciate just like that she's in bed next to me every night alive, and and I think that's something that a lot of us lose touch of because we're so used to the physical. And I miss that. Don't get me wrong, but Sam and I we were never emotionally connected. Like our whole marriage. That's why she went outside of the marriage. Like we just never had that connection. Like, and so I think that's so powerful for us. And that feels really good. Like when we can feel our partner's feelings, that's cool.
So, looking back now, do you feel like it was the pain itself or the belief that there was no way forward that really had the most weight?
I think uh I think the pain of betrayal. Um, but honestly, I didn't really understand again how perspective plays into our life in hindsight, right? So I didn't really understand because I never asked what was Sam going through. Like it wasn't that I was selfish, I just was not aware, right? Um, which I suppose could be selfish in a relationship like that. But I felt like because I was so used to growing up as a kid, of like, if I do these things to make me better, life is going to be better. Right. And so I think that I just sat back into that as an adult because that's what I knew. Like, if I do better, life's going to be better. If I fix me, life's going to be better. If I transform my business, life's going to be better. And so I just was very consumed and obsessed with my business and with the things that I was doing to fix our marriage that I really didn't put a lot of thought, which is silly, and I giggle about it, but I didn't put a lot of effort into like, what's Sam going through? I didn't think about that until after my attempt, to be honest with you. I didn't ever think about like, what struggles is she going through? Because I was so consumed with that expectation of to meet her expectation that didn't exist. I was working so hard to reach that it was all consuming. And then that's what I mean is you don't have time for your people if you're just trying to race to the top of this mountain that doesn't exist. You just don't notice anything else because you're just constantly trying to get there.
I love that you've lived through so much and you've done the work to really move through it, and you continue to do the work so that you're not just surviving. And now you're on the other side helping others. What does that actually look like for you today? Like, how are you showing up and supporting people now?
I can promise people that are watching, when you start living intentionally for you, things line up, opportunities present themselves to you. When you're not living intentionally to your design, life feels like a fight. And if you feel that way, if you feel like life's a fight, it just means that, or you feel like you're swimming upstream, it's because you are. You're not going with the flow. You're not going with the current. But when you hear someone say like, "Man, lighten up, go with the flow," I think that saying was meant. I think everyone's hopefully heard like, just go with the flow, or whatever. But if you really take that into like deep consideration, you have to understand what is your flow. Like, I think once you understand and are aware of who you are as a human being, and you just go with the flow intentionally, it doesn't mean just don't do anything. But once you start doing that and honoring your intentionality, you start seeing opportunities that are just like coming to you. And I can promise you that's real because ever since I sold my company and I've started making very intentional decisions based off of my awareness, I've been really blessed. And that doesn't mean financially. It just means I was gifted with the opportunity to move somewhere we love living, and I have palm trees in my backyard, and my daughter gets to play soccer all year long, where she didn't in Colorado, and she loves that. And Sam's thriving because it's not cold here. And then it just, the success isn't about the financials anymore. The success is just, how can I live the best life that I get? So, I mean, I would say one of the biggest focuses I have right now, and this is one of those things that's just come to me because I'm kind of in flow, is I come from the trades. I owned a garage door company for a long time. I was in garage doors for 27 years. And so I've had a lot of small business owners come to me and just say, "Hey, we would love to work with you on this, this, and this." And so what's really interesting is the first thing I do when I work with a small business is I incorporate the 7 levels of energy. And a lot of businesses think that's strange, and it kind of is. However, because I'm honoring that and I'm leaning into, I feel that's what these businesses need, and it's working. It's led me to bigger opportunities. And so, I recently got invited to San Antonio again, actually. So I'm going to be flying out there on the 27th, and I'm going to be doing an energy leadership at one of the largest residential electrical contractors in the state. That's pretty special because the trades don't usually do that kind of stuff. The trades are usually like strong men, and we don't talk about our feelings. And the energy that I coach and I teach it's not mystical energy. I mean, this is all stuff that we've all heard of: victim energy, fight or flight, transitional or coping, and then, you know, I want to win energy, collaboration, full flow, peace. And so, teaching people how to honor these levels of energy, especially in the trades, which the trades have a high level of addiction rates to different things. There's a high level of, I don't know what the numbers are, but the divorce rate in the blue collar world is very high because of the stress that these blue collar guys that are working in the trades and like HVAC, garage doors, electricians, plumbers, you know, the jobs are stressful. They're really hard. And these guys are like guys, and supposed to be tough guys. But what's special is if we can teach them the levels of energy and how to access them consciously, it can create a better work environment for themselves because they can regulate those emotions. But it also gives them more opportunities with clients, in an educational position of understanding like where the client's energy is. Because when you learn the energy, not only do you regulate it here, but like I can see your energy. I can feel your energy. And that's a power because especially in your job, if you can read somebody else's energy through intuition, if you have the tools, well, now you can connect with them on a deeper level. And so I believe it's gonna change the dynamic of how a lot of companies do work. And I hope that I'm kind of at the forefront of that, which is cool.
For someone listening right now who might see a part of themselves in your story or feel like they're in a place where nothing's really making sense, who do you feel this book is really for?
Oh man, I I know I should niche this down. I think any human being that reads that book is going to resonate with a lot of it. Honestly, the title is the heaviest part of the book, I believe. Javier, maybe you can back that up. The title is the heaviest part. It is very hooky, and it sounds scary. But that was the idea, right? That's actually the name that I dreamt that night in August. I just had a dream. That's what the book was called, so that's what the book's called. Um, I think if you read the book, it'll change how you feel about the title. And I think that's a good way to say it.
So, Trapper, before we close, I want to shift gears for a second because there's something about you that I've always found interesting: your painted nails. Where did that come from? Because it's kind of become a signature for you, right?
Yeah, actually, I think they're almost the same color as in the book right now. So I think I wrote this in the book. Maybe I didn't. Maybe this will be like a second edition. When Sam was in the hospital, probably like the third week that Sam was in the ICU, Jaden came to me and said, "Dad, who am I supposed to get my nails done with?" And I said, "Well, I'll go. Like I'll go with you." And so I went and got a manicure and a pedicure with Jaden, and she picked colors for me, and it wasn't this concept at the time. And then I just started doing mani pedis with Jaden, once a month while Sam was in the hospital. And then I just kept doing that when Sam was out of the hospital because Sam's stroke left her left arm paralyzed, and she doesn't like creating challenges for the nail people. So Sam doesn't really go that much anymore. And so Jaden started calling me mom, dad, when Sam was in the hospital. And so what eventually just started out as like daddy daughter mani pedis together. Now I just like getting manicures and pedicures because it feels good, and I think it just should be part of everyday hygiene for everybody. That's just kind of become like my signature manicure.
And so, Trapper, for anyone listening who wants to connect with you, learn more about your work, or just follow your journey, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, well, I'm old, so I'm 43, and Facebook is the best place to reach me. I actually still I am in charge of my DMs on Facebook. Instagram, I still get my Instagrams. I'm growing my Instagram. Um, you can go to trappersearles.com, send an email. I'm still like a solo team right now. I hope that's not the case for another 6 months. So, for the next 6 months to a year, I'm definitely gonna be the one checking emails and checking my stuff. But the book is available Amazon. It's available barnesandnoble.com. It's available walmart.com, target.com. I mean, it's available pretty much anywhere.com. I don't have it in any stores. It's not like a store book, but if you really just have to have the book, and if you get a hold of, I'll tell you this, if you get a hold of me or Javier on our socials, and we see that you're interested, I could probably get you a book. I usually keep about 500 of them on hand because I give out hundreds of them a month. But if anyone listens to this and they're in a moment where they feel like there's nothing to live for, you are enough to live for. I mean, that's it. And most of the time, we don't want to live because of other people. We have something to give, and there's lessons that we can teach. So if anyone's listening to this, you are enough to live. And like that, it's that simple. And if you need support, there's a ton of support. And we are, I'm sure Javier will support this. We're happy to help you find that support.
I love it. Trapper, thank you for being here and for sharing this with everyone listening. If something in this conversation resonated, don't ignore it. Sit with it. Get the book. Because sometimes the version of you that's falling apart is actually the one making space for who you're meant to become. And also, remember, love isn't something we chase, it's something we're built for.